It's another D&D video. What I'm hoping to do is basically talk about my DMing experience. I've been playing D&D since, I believe, 1978, which was the 4th grade for me. A good friend of mine back then had introduced me to D&D. He had let me borrow his player's handbook, and I was immediately enthralled. My 4th grade teacher had just finished reading The Hobbit to the class, and it was then that I knew I wanted to be a writer, which I still haven't done. I haven't done it. I write a ton of stories that I never actually either finish or set to a publisher. So, because the teacher had read The Hobbit to the class, and my friend had let me borrow the player's handbook, and it basically explained what D&D was it's not a board game. You are basically this guy who tells a story, and you have players that interact with that story. I was immediately enthralled. I ended up buying the DM's guide. I ended up buying the monster manual, all this first edition stuff that I still have to this day. I still have my original books. Over the years, I've been player, DM, player, DM, player, DM, back and forth. My preference is typically to be the DM because that allows me to express my creative writing that I never seem to do in pen and paper. So it lets me be the storyteller that I have these players interact with my story and basically change and mold the story as to how they want to. And it allows me to be spontaneous and creative on the spot, which challenges me and lets me just unleash all the creativity I have storming in my brain. What I want to talk about is, over the years, I've learned something that I think some DMs may also forget. So as you DM and you play with players, you tend to forget that everyone is either going to be familiar with D&D or not familiar with D&D. And sometimes as a DM, when you have those people who are not always super familiar with D&D, you just kind of glaze over the description. And the reason I'm talking about this is, so as I've said, I've played D&D since the 4th grade. My good friend Chuck has been in several of my D&D games, as his wife as well, Tammy. And I've dragged my own wife into D&D games. A few years ago, I was DMing for Chuck, Tammy, and my wife. But also, first-time players included their son, Matt, who he's played The Witcher. He's played all these RPG games and stuff like that. So he's got an idea of what things might look like. But it also included their daughter Sammy, who's not played any RPG games, not really into D&D, not any of this stuff. But she wanted to play because she was sincerely interested in playing D&D. And also Sammy's husband Jake, who is also a gamer and has had some experience. So I kind of had a mixed party here of people who have played D&D with me before, people who've played RPG games before, and someone who's never played an RPG game or D&D but was sincerely interested. And unfortunately, I made a mistake of basically glazing over descriptions. When they encountered a monster, I would just say something like, you see 6 goblins on the side of a hill, they've got a campfire going, and they don't seem to be aware of anything around them. They just seem to be arguing about something. This, sure, it works for people who've played D&D, or even someone who's played an RPG game, but Sammy may not have an idea of what a goblin looks like, or maybe she's basing it off of something like Harry Potter, or a movie that she's seen like Harry Potter that might make a reference to goblins or something like that, but which is typically very different than what you would see in D&D. A couple months ago, I would say like 6 months ago, a good friend of mine that I met through, I'll say a good friend now. I'd met her through my boss, my old boss. We were all playing EverQuest together. We jumped back onto a EverQuest server that had like the classic stuff on it. And Anita was one of the people that Dom knew, and I had never met her in person. I just knew her through just basically speaking on Discord while we played EverQuest. One day, we ended up friending each other on Facebook because we were playing EverQuest all the time together. One day she posted something that she was at a brewery where they play D&D. It's called Battle Mage here in San Diego. So they were playing D&D, and she posted a picture of a DM screen. It's a wooden DM screen, and it happens to be the exact same type of model DM screen that I had just gotten for Christmas from Sammy and Jake. So I replied to it and I said, oh, hey, you're playing D&D. And she's like, oh, yeah, I just started playing D&D at Battle Mage and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I love playing D&D. And so she's like, hold on, you play D&D? And I was like, oh, I've been playing D&D forever. Like, I was back in the day D&D guy. And she said, would you be interested in DMing a game for people who have never played D&D? And I was, of course, like, an opportunity to DM again, because my game with Chuck, Tammy, the wife Sammy, and all of them had kind of gone off to the side. Sammy had, at the time, gotten pregnant. She now has a wonderful baby girl. So that game kind of went on hold, so I was not DMing anymore. So the opportunity to DM was a great opportunity for me. So I said, of course, I'd love to DM for people who've never played D&D. So the day comes, I show up at Anita's house. I've got my DM screen, my little wooden one that I was just talking about. I've got all my books out. I've got like an MP3 player. I have the music for tabletopaudio.com. If you don't know of it, use it. It's a great tool. So I have that ready to play, some like music in the background, some ambient sounds. And I'm thinking, I am their first impression of D&D. I am gonna make it or break it for them. And as soon as that realization set in, I suddenly got extremely nervous. I've never met any of these people, and I'd only met Anita once in person really quick at a brewery. Like, it was like, hey Anita, hey, how's it going? And I'd only recognized her from being friends on Facebook, so we'd only like interacted in person like once, like really quick. So even being at Anita's house was a fairly like nerve-wracking thing for me, because I'm in someone's house that I've met once and I don't want to mess anything up. And now I'm going to have these people that I've never DM'd for about to walk in the door that I've never met. They've never played D&D. Everything's on me whether or not they're going to enjoy this D&D game. And I'm a nervous wreck. I'm ready to bolt out of the house any minute now, because my nerves have suddenly caught up to me like, hey, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I'm about to DM for people who've never played D&D before, whom I've never met. And I am a huge introvert. Like, if you get me at a party, I'm typically, unless I'm super comfortable with just the select people I know, I'm very quiet. I'm the guy who's sitting in the corner like, when is it time to go? When is it time to go? And if I'm familiar with everyone that's there, I'm great. I'm the guy who's the center of the party. But you throw in one random person and suddenly I'm off in the corner because there's a random element I don't know. So eventually they all start showing up, and I meet them, and I meet them, and I meet them. And the crazy thing is, the majority of the players in this game I'm about to DM are all girls. So essentially the table is going to be, we're going to have Amy, who typically sits to my left. She's playing a dwarf wizard. Next to her is her husband, Dave, who is playing a dragonborn barbarian. Next to him is their good friend, Albert, who is playing, I believe, a high elf ranger. Next to them is Melinda, who is playing a halfling bard. Next to her is Jessica, who is playing a high elf cleric. Wait, so Albert might be a wood elf ranger. That might be it, because I think there's only one high elf in this party. And then next to Jessica, who's playing the high elf cleric, we have Anita, who is playing the the gnome ranger / rogue. So this is my party. None of them have ever played D&D except for Anita, who's played, I believe at this time, just a few sessions at Battle Mage. So as we're rolling out the characters and I'm explaining the game, how it works, we're talking about the stats and what classes do what and who's going to play what and all this other stuff, I am almost within 10 minutes of the joking back and forth and the banter that's happening, I am suddenly in my element. All the nervousness that I felt before I started this game was out the window. Like, I suddenly felt like I knew everyone for the longest time. Everyone was joking, the banter, and to add to this, a bunch of them had never met one another. So obviously, Amy and David met each other and they know Albert and stuff like that. But everyone only knew Anita. Anita was the main connection for everyone at this table. So this was the first time several people were actually getting to meet and interact with the other person. You know, they might have interacted on Facebook and stuff like that, but this is the first time in person that several of them are interacting with each other. So as I said, within 15 minutes, I already knew I was super comfortable with these people. Everyone is making the same kind of jokes I would make. Everyone, the banter and the connection everyone has is amazing at the table. So that put me at ease almost immediately. And so as we're playing, everyone's got their characters finally rolled out. Everyone knows kind of what they're doing. Level 1, there's not a lot you have to know about your character except for like the wizard and the cleric, who have to now know these spells and stuff like that. So everyone's got a gist of what their characters are, and that is honestly the majority of the first night that we're all meeting, is like getting the characters together, getting them established, and stuff like that. And I basically start the adventure that they're from a continent, and they're sailing to this new continent that has recently been discovered. A bunch of treasure and all this, stuff is happening here that a lot of adventurers are looking into and trying to get rich off stuff that they find. So it's basically like the gold rush over on this continent, but with like magic items and knowledge and all this other stuff. So that's the gist of the adventure. They've sailed from this other continent to this new town, and in this new town they start learning about like some trouble that's happening around the area. For the first 3 levels when we played D&D, I told them, don't worry too much about everything else. Don't worry about your hit points. Everyone has up to -10. So if you have 8 hit points, you technically have 18. But at 0 and beyond to -10, you are unconscious and basically bleeding out. And every round after, if you are at below 0, so if you're at -1, every round after, you are bleeding out another point. And if you reach -11, your character dies. So this gives everyone a buffer to basically give them an opportunity, if they want to try something a little crazy because they're not super familiar with the game yet, to go ahead and try it. You have this extra buffer of hit points that you're not rolling a death save right at 0. So, I want them to get familiar with the character since this is the first time that they're playing D&D. So they have this buffer of -10 hit points to go to. This allows them to get a little crazy, a little wild, do things that might not always be the safest idea, but they'll learn quickly, like, oh, I'm going to go charge this guy, even though I don't have a great AC. Oh, you just got knocked down to -2, and now you're bleeding out. Now someone else in the party has to get to you and do like a medicine check to basically stabilize you at 0, but you're still unconscious until you get to 1. So that was like the first 3 levels. This is basically giving them the opportunity to learn how to play their characters. And I was also at this time not worried about the cost of spells. So, for example, I'm just going to use this example. If they wanted to cast Identify and it has like a 50, a diamond value of 50 gold pieces. For the first 3 levels, I said, don't worry about it. What I want you to do is get familiar with the spells. Don't worry about the cost. Don't even really worry about how many rounds it takes. We're just going to assume that if you're casting a spell, it's just going to cast on your turn. That's it. If it says it's instantaneous or if it takes 2 rounds to cast, don't worry about it. Until we get to level 3, it's just going to cast when you cast it. This gives them the opportunity to learn what spells do what. They can read about it, they can cast it, and they can see, okay, well, this spell was good, this spell was good, this one wasn't, this is what this does. Cool, I get an understanding of the spells for the first 3 levels. Another thing I did is, something I really enjoyed with 5th edition, is I used milestones. This assures that players are not going to be inclined to kill every character that they stumble across. Oftentimes you have in old D&D where everything was XP. If you had a quest giver, the party would roll up on him and he's like, hello, I have a quest for you, my lads. And then they kill him and they're like, how much XP do I get? And you're like, well, you just killed the guy who was going to give you a quest. So you get 10 XP, whatever. Did away with that. Doing milestones now. So the way I controlled the milestones, since this is the first time everyone's playing D&D at this table except for myself and Anita, who's done a few sessions, is I'm watching to see how familiar they are with their characters. Like once they got an understanding of their first level skills and spells and what does what, on the next adventure, I said, okay, you've got an understanding of how level 1 works. Everyone is now level 2. So now I'd give it a time, now they have these new skills and these new powers and stuff like that and new spells. So I would do the same thing. I'd basically watch and wait. And once I felt like everyone was comfortable with level 1, level 2 characters, now everyone is level 3. Now things are serious. Now your -10 hit point window is out. When you go to 0, now you're doing a death save. So they've got an understanding now of how to play their character. They've got an understanding of their skills, and now they're a little more powerful, so they should be able to take what I throw at them. Then with at level 4, there was a quest that they did, and it was probably one of my funnest ones that I've done. So essentially, as a surprise, so the party, as I said, they've come to this new continent, and they're in this city called the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast says, hey, this is when they're around level 3 or 2 or 3. Hey, can you help escort this caravan to Ridgecrest, which is the big major city? It's like Waterdeep, but not on the ocean. It's just this big, huge town in my world. And so the party agrees, for a good cost of, being hired as mercenaries to basically protect this caravan. So there's, they have some adventures along the way to Ridgecrest, but when they get to Ridgecrest, essentially, I believe they were level 3 at this time, a very flamboyant gentleman says, oh, you've escorted, something that's on this caravan for me that's very precious to me. Please join me for my party, but no weapons allowed. He basically explains it's a very extravagant party and no weapons. If you bring them, we'll search you and we'll put it in a locker and you can have it at the end of the night. So the party goes in, and I've already got the map laid out on the table, but I've got it flipped on the other side so that what's on the map is not visible. And so everyone's got their food on the table. We're eating pizza and amazing bakery stuff that Jessica makes, and we've got like the lumpia that I've brought, and everything's on this table. And once they get to the party, I said, okay, everyone move stuff off, flip the map. So we flip the map over, and it's essentially every single room that's been in every version of Clue. So we have the foyer, we have the living room, we have the library, and all this stuff. And it's not in the same design, because obviously the Clue is just a square room, but it's meant to be this huge mansion. But every room is a representation of what has been in a room in the game Clue. So as soon as everyone recognized that this was stuff from Clue, everyone freaked out. Everyone was like, oh my god, this is so cool. And so I had a list of NPC players that I had generated. Name, race, the class that they play, some of their traits, and who they might have had an issue with among other guests. And as the party is talking to them, this is me trying to get them to roleplay a little bit. Because so far I've not really pushed the aspect of role-playing. I've just said, pretty much do whatever you want. If your character says it has a weakness for like drinking, like Anita picked for her character, if drinks are served, you're not inclined to be like, hey, I'm going to drink, because that's what my character would do. Just do whatever you want to do. But in this Clue session game that I've done, I'm trying to invoke this role-playing aspect that I say. There's a bunch of guests here, and as you talk to them, they start to learn that certain guests have problems with other people. And something that I was doing, I forgot to mention, this is the whole point of this video, is since this were a group of people that have never played D&D, what I was doing is I was describing everything. Rather than saying something like, oh, you see a goblin up on the hill, he seems to be a scout, I would say something like, as you gaze off into the distance, you can see what appears to be a humanoid figure. He stands about 4 feet tall. From what you can tell from the moonlight dancing off of his skin, it looks like he has like a green toned skin, maybe like a greenish yellow. He has slightly pointed ears and like big fangs, and his bulgy eyes kind of seem to be looking around. So this painted a picture in everyone's head. When I said goblin, everyone might have had a different idea because no one at this table has played D&D. And for me to say a goblin, someone might think it's like a 7-foot creature like they've seen in the Lord of the Rings cartoon, or they might think it's like a little 2-foot creature from like Harry Potter or something like that. So I wanted to be very clear with everyone at this table what a goblin looks like. And I've done this for everything for my campaign with them. I've described everything, and I think this has helped immerse all of them into the storytelling. I'm not assuming anyone here knows what anything looks like. And I think that's very important for DMs to always do. Don't just assume that just because you have people who've played for 8 years at your table that they all know what it looks like. Sure, they do. I mean, they probably all know what a goblin looks like. But take the time to explain what it looks like. Pull them into the story. Don't just be like, you see 3 goblins standing at the cave entrance. Explain, you see 4 humanoid figures standing there. They're Their skin is green, and they seem to be holding like spears and gazing around. Their pointed ears seem to be listening for anything that might be suspicious sounding. Do that type of stuff, and I think that helps pull people into the game. So anyway, going back to what I was talking about. So I've introduced these NPCs into this party, and basically everyone's interacting with people. Melinda did some great role playing. She actually seduced one of the players, or one of the NPCs, in order to get some books that she was trying to get a hold of that might be useful to the party. But then one of them ends up murdered. Not the player, but the NPC. So they go to investigate, and they discover that someone's been stabbed and murdered in one of the dining rooms. And this is where a lot of people don't do critical fails. But this is where sometimes stuff like this pays off. So as I said, no one was allowed to bring weapons into this party. Some had managed to smuggle it in by doing a dexterity check to ensure that they weren't spotted bringing a weapon in. But one of them who didn't bring a weapon in is Amy, who is playing the Dwarf Wizard. So she sees this dagger in this guy, and she's one of the first people that sees the body. Someone else sees it and kind of screams, but Amy, her dwarf, tries to take the dagger out because she wants a weapon. She's one of the people who didn't manage to sneak a weapon in, but she wants a weapon because clearly something's going on. Someone's been murdered now. Now she's sure she needs a weapon. So she tries to take the weapon out of the body, and I say, oh, you know what, go ahead and just roll for me. Tell me what you get on a d20. And she rolls a 1. So what I have happen is, one of the people who've seen it has screamed. More people are charging into the room to see what is going on. And someone sees her taking the dagger out as she fumbles and drops it. So suddenly everyone thinks she's the murderer. This was not planned at all. I did not plan for anyone in the party to be assumed as the person who has committed the murder. The actual story of what's happening is there's a doppelganger. There's 2 of them actually in this party, and the object that was escorted here was from a previous campaign of mine. I love to let me go back a second. I love to tie things into my world and make it a living world. So one of my previous campaigns with Tammy, Chuck, and all of them, this is one of the first generations of this world that I've played. They've found basically a sphere that when you look through it, it will allow you to see through an illusion, whether it's a spell or even a doppelganger. So they had gone to get it, and at some point it ended up lost at sea. So what this is that sphere has been found again, and this guy wants it. And the doppelgangers have learned that this sphere has been found and obviously want to take it and destroy it. So doppelgangers have infiltrated the party. So that's who's actually committed the murder. There's 2 doppelgangers running around, but a bunch of people now think Amy's the murderer. So that critical fail allowed me to throw in a random element that I had not planned, but became very vital to the game. Because now everyone was watching Amy, like NPCs were watching Amy, suspecting that it was Amy. And then they started to suspect, well, here's the friends that she came with. Like, are they all involved? So it was a lot of fun to be able to throw this random element because she had rolled a critical fail on trying to basically stealth this dagger out of the guy's body without anyone noticing. So this interaction of clue, they eventually find out that who it is, and Anita has a dog named Bubbles that is a mastiff that she purchased that keeps tracking the doppelgangers and keeps going to the guys, and they're like, it wasn't me, because doppelgangers have shifted form a few times. They'll kill someone, take their form, and then hide that body and go imitate them. So there's a kind of some confusion as to who's who, and the mastiff keeps going to a different person saying that's who was here last. So it was a lot of fun as they tried to figure this out. And that's what it is. So by the first 3 levels, as I said, it's get to know your character, get to know what they do, get to know what the spells are. All right, 3rd level, now it's 0 is the cutoff. Like if you go beyond 0 for health, you now are making a death save because now you've learned your character, you've learned your spells, so you're a little more powerful, you can handle what's going on. So in the 4th, so with this 4th level, they do this clue party and all this other stuff, and they figure out that the main guy who is hosting the party is not just this flamboyant guy who has these weird sex slaves as servants who come out with really tight leather outfits and stuff like that, but that it's a Cambion, I believe they're pronounced, essentially like a demon child mix. And so he reveals himself to be who he is. The party is now struggling because they don't have weapons to fight him. So it's a tough fight. They actually, two of the guests, oh, I should go back. So one of the things that they do, the party discovers, is that this Cambion, who they don't know is a Cambion yet, is involved in illegal trades. He has captured a tabaxi, which on this continent no one has ever seen before. So tabaxis are completely brand new, foreign, like this humanoid feline. No one on this continent knows what a tabaxi is, but this Cambion, this human who's actually a Cambion in disguise, has found this trade market where he's like, hey, I'm selling this as a slave. You can have this pretty cat to, sell, do whatever you want, to abuse, whatever you want to do to this thing, you can do it. It's smart, it's intelligent, you can make it serve you food. And so Anita, who's, as I said, playing the Ranger Rogue, is like, well, this isn't right. Like, we need to free this tabaxi. So she has freed the tabaxi, like when all this murder stuff is happening, all this confusion is happening, people are running around the house. It's literally just like the game Clue. Or, sorry, just like the movie Clue. Everyone's running from room to room as murders are happening. And she manages to free the tabaxi, who says, hey, I'm super thankful, what can I do to help? Melinda, who plays the bard, it has a disguise kit, so she kind of tries to disguise the tabaxi as best she can. Well, it's fairly well, but it's clearly like, like this kind of looks like a human, but has like fur sticking out from part of the disguise because it wasn't that great of a role. So the tabaxi, and there is a tiefling paladin who is actually, when I was playing, I joined Anita at Battle Mage a few times for the game, but the problem was by the time I leave work and I drive up there, the game is typically already started, so I'm typically holding up the game. So I ended up, after a while, just removing myself from the Battle Mage game because I felt bad that I was typically holding up the game and stuff like that. So I loved the background that I wrote for my tiefling, that essentially he had been a tiefling. The mother saw that he was like a demon child, basically put him on a little thing in a river and sent him down river, and a bunch of gypsies found him. And in the Battle Mage world, vampires are the primary enemy. So the background I gave him is that these gypsies, who know that the vampires are an issue, basically taught him the ways of the old gods, and that he would be, despite his appearance, he would be the justice of the gods and bring back the light. So his name was Teleris Hopebringer, and that's what the gypsies named him. So I actually enjoyed the backstory that I'd written for this guy, so I had actually put him in the game. But like the others, he had no weapons. So it's not like I put him in to, here's my guy, he's gonna steal the show. I never do that. I never let the NPCs do the final kill, and I never let them out damage anyone else. Even if I roll a nat 20 as the NPC attacking, they never do critical damage. They will always just do normal damage, and they never deliver the killing blow, no matter what. If, for example, if it has 10 hit points left, they do a hit, I roll damage, and they do 10 damage. As far as I'm concerned, he still has that 10 points of damage. I just write down, yeah, he did 10 points of damage, but that 10 damage stays if that's all that the bad guy has left. So essentially, the guy hits, but technically does no damage. Because I never want to take away from the players being the main stars of the story. So NPCs are there when I use them just to do a little bit of stuff, never to steal the show. But I wanted to put Teleris into the story because, like I said, I enjoyed it, and I needed NPCs to be at this party, and I just randomly generated a bunch, and I thought, I'm just going to throw my own guy in here from the Battle Mage game. And basically, same idea. He's a tiefling, he's a paladin, he was raised by gypsies to basically restore order to the world. So the party, fast forward, alright, so the Cambion reveals himself, and the party's struggling to fight him because only a few have weapons, but some of them can cast spells. Teleris, who is the tiefling paladin, and Felina, who is the tabaxi rogue, both help in the fight against the Cambion, and they finally defeat the Cambion. And they know that he's rich because he has this huge mansion in the middle of Ridgecrest. So they search the house, and they eventually find where his gold is kept. And he has stored a bunch of gold, but it's trapped. The party knows it's trapped and they're paranoid. They know that I am going to throw a trap at them. I'm not just going to give them a bunch of money. So they did some creative stuff and eventually got through and got the trap. And the interesting thing is, so when they finally found the sphere when they stopped the doppelgangers and found the actual doppelgangers, and Anita, so fearful of this magical item, decided to chuck it at a wall and shatter it. So it caused an explosion on the wall, which is what revealed where the tiefling's treasure was. It was in a secret passage in the wall. So they saw, they could see a hole and they could see treasure. So now they know somehow there's a way to get into this other room that's behind this wall. And from her throwing it, that's how they found it. So she ended up destroying this ancient relic, but they found the treasure. So as I said, they eventually do some creative stuff and they finally get it. They got between the 6 or 7 of them, they got something like 5,000 gold. But they also split it with Talaris and Felina, since they had helped fight the Cambion. So now, a few of the players were not present for this fight. One of them was Albert, who plays the Wood Elf Ranger. He was not present for the fight. He was not able to make the game session. So when he came back and he learned that everyone had all of this gold, except for him, he was like, no! And it comes up as a joke all the time now. And it's great. Like I said, everyone jokes so well in this party. And I think part of it is the chemistry between everyone. Everyone's really, really caring. Everyone's really invested in the game and their characters. And I think part of it is because I am taking the time to not assume anyone knows anything about the game. I am going all out for descriptions. I want to talk about everything. So right now, they recently reached level 5. During one of the adventures, unfortunately Jessica, in one of the 2 or 3 game sessions ago, Jessica's husband, because Jessica, so let me back up a little bit here. So Jessica has never played D&D until we started this game. But within a few sessions, Jessica had purchased the player's handbook. It was either her or her brother. And then it was either her or her brother got her a figure from like Hero Forge, I believe it was. And then she got like multiple sets of dice. And then she started doing like these little creative wax things of dragons and stuff like that. So Jessica has been all into the game. So she often, I assume, talked about the game. So eventually, a few sessions ago, her husband was like, hey, do you think it's cool if I join the game? And I was like, by all means. Normally my ideal group of players is 4. Because what happens is when you get more than 4, when combat happens, it can take a long time for it to make it around the table, especially when you're including whatever monsters the DM has included into the fight. So ideally, my group is 4. Right off the bat, this was more than 4. But because of how well everyone was gelling and the chemistry at this table, I knew it was fine. Like, even though combat might take longer to get around the table, for everyone to get their turn, including like the monsters I'm throwing in there, everyone was having such a good time, like watching what another person does, or even if it wasn't their turn, they might have a side conversation over there just about what's going on in life or something like that. And I didn't mind, because everyone was having a good time. So eventually Jessica's husband joined the party, and he is a human fighter. So he was part of the clue game, so he got some of this gold. So here's this new guy. Yeah, the way I introduced him is that when he rolled his character, he made him very military. All his background stuff is military. And so I basically introduced him that he was always a part of the caravan guard. So he just ended up joining this party on their side adventures and stuff like that. So he was easy to bring in that way because he had picked a fighter and had this military background. Caravan guard, you've always been part of this caravan that they're escorting. Now you're just a part of the party. So he was there for the clue money. So you got this new guy who's only been in a few sessions who landed all this money, and you have Albert, who's been in there from the start, missed 1 session and missed out on a bunch of gold. So now there's a point to them getting the gold. I purposely wanted to give them a lot of gold because now they're hitting level 5. And I say, now you have gold. Everyone has money. Everyone has a ton of gold. Now we're watching out for food. Everyone's tracking food now. Everyone is tracking arrows. I do a thing where if you roll a dex check and you get 12 or higher on a dexterity check, including your bonus, you can recover an arrow that you've used. If you fail, that essentially means that the arrow is snapped, the head of the arrow is no longer usable, but I give everyone an opportunity to recover arrows. But so we're tracking food, we're tracking arrows, and now for those spells that have a cost, I've printed out an Excel sheet that has all the spells from the player's handbook, because right now in my world, only the spells in the player's handbook are available. The other spells from the other books that have come out are not yet available because there's going to be a quest that will unlock those spells. I don't want to go into it because someone might be watching it from my game, but essentially there will be a quest that will be able to unleash the potential of this other magic that exists in this world that somehow is being locked away. So right now I've printed out this Excel sheet that has all the spells, and if there's a cost, it just says 50 gold. So whereas a spell component might cost a gem or a diamond worth 50 gold, what I do is I just say it's 50 gold. We're just going to assume if you're casting the spell, you have that ingredient. There's no need for the whole side quest to go find someone who's selling a diamond that's worth 50 gold just so that they can cast Identify. So as long as they have the gold equivalent of what it costs to cast that spell, I'm assuming they have the component that it costs, so that there's no side quest to go find the actual component that it would cost, like a gem worth 50 or a diamond worth 50. If they have 50 gold, then they technically have the gem. I'm just giving them that cost that says, hey, I'm going to cast Identify. Okay, it's a 50 gold spell. We'll just assume since you have the 50 gold that you do have that gem, and it's just going to cost you 50 gold out of your total. So now I've introduced them, you have that negative 10 HP for this little buffer to learn your character in case you do something kind of foolish or if an enemy hits you too hard. Level 2, okay, it's kind of the same buffer, you're still kind of weak. Level 3, we've done away with the negative 10 buffer. You are now at 0, it's a death save. And then level 4, you're a little bit trying to get him into the role-playing aspect with these NPCs and stuff like that. And now they've got the gold. Level 5, now, you're going to have to keep an eye on arrows. If you run out, you can't use them. You have a chance to recover it. We're going to start tracking food now, food and water. If you have 7 days worth of food and water and you travel for 8 days, there's a day you don't have food and water. And then, as I said, spell components now costing money if it does indeed cost money in the player's handbook. And some of them where it doesn't actually cost money in the player's handbook, but it says you need like 3 soft stones and 4 feathers, I'll just put 1 gold, because if it has some kind of component at times, just putting 1 gold will indicate that, hey, it did require some actual spell components, but it didn't technically have a cost that says it has to be a diamond worth 50 gold. If it had some spell components, at times I just made it 1 gold. So now everyone's super cautious about casting spells because they don't want to just burn through a bunch of spells, but they've had 4 levels to learn what spells do what. So they've got a great understanding of how spells work. Now casting time has come into play after 4th level. So if it says it takes 2 rounds to cast, it now takes 2 rounds to cast. But they now know typically what that spell does. So all of this to say is when you DM, take the opportunity to always describe everything. Don't assume that everyone knows. By describing it, you're pulling them into the story. And also, if you have new players, try some of the things I've tried. I think it's worked out really well for my game. If you have any tips, suggestions, or anything like that, feel free to leave it down in the comments. If you liked what I did, feel free to subscribe. I may actually do more of these D&D type videos. I did not expect this one to be as long as it is. I just thought it was going to be like, hey, here's what I do for D&D, here's some tips. But it ended up being much longer because I tend to ramble, and I'm very passionate about D&D. So if you like it, subscribe. I may be doing more of these, talking about the different D&D games I do.